Smash! Space Marines.
Yeah, today we're finally doing the long-awaited sequel to my Emperor's Children Kitbash video. Though by technicality, this is a Space Marine Legends video. The Marine in question is Ulix The Enthralled, Chaos Lord of the Angels of Ecstasy. In this video you can expect some lore, a lot of building, and a little bit of painting. I'm happy to finally have a purpose for this model as well. The Legion Praetor is a great figure, and it's just built for a Slaaneshi Marine in my opinion. The last thing I actually pre-ordered from GW was the Horus Heresy box set, and I've had this guy sitting in there for a while now. But before I get into anything else, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you like what you see, share it with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For $3 a month, you get to see my videos early. For $5, you get some extra videos and some extra roles in the Mishmash Discord. And above everything, it just really helps the channel. I want to extend a gigantic thank you to my channel members. You guys are amazing. And to promote myself just a little bit more, if you're interested in any Wargames Atlantic products like Quar, make sure to use my affiliate link in the description as it gets your boy a commission. But enough about that, let's talk about the Angels of Ecstasy. So first and foremost, I've always kind of been mesmerized by this chapter because, man, that is the most terrifying name for a Chaos Warband I can possibly think of. Ultra-violent names like Night Lords and Crimson Slaughter are pretty to the point. I think you can kind of guess what they get up to. Angels of Ecstasy? That just leaves incredibly scary hypotheticals in my mind. And that's kind of what their lore implies too. So, for the origins of the Angels of Ecstasy, they were originally a loyalist Space Marine chapter called the Sons of Ulthunas. They'd end up rebelling against the Imperium during an event known as the Ganymedean Betrayal, and they'd go on to worship Lord of Grabass Slaanesh. Now, the only true piece of media that really dives into the Angels of Ecstasy is A Song for the Lost. This is where we meet our character Ulix. Growing up, Ulix was a choir boy for an Imperium ecclesiarchy. Routinely, he would be abused by his bishop, continually switched for not remembering the catechisms of the Imperium. His only form of comfort would be a fellow initiate known as Sister Defay. She would visit him every night, only being summoned by the prayer that she had taught him. Mistress of pain, master of pleasure, hear your child's cry. As you can probably guess, she is very, very loyal to her true god Emperor number 1. Years later, Ulix would become one of the Adeptus Astartes, even climbing to the rank of Chapter Master of the Sons of Ulthunas. But surprise, surprise, he would soon become a Chaos Lord of the Angels of Ecstasy and a proper champion of Slaanesh. The Angels of Ecstasy were very much the type to use sonic weapons, but what sets Ulix apart is he was silent. To him, the only song that truly mattered was that of Sister Defay's. For centuries, her voice would echo in the back of his mind. Even through the indoctrination process of his initiation in the Adeptus Astartes, even through the clamoring noise of his warband, her voice would still remain. And to hear her song once more was the only thing he truly needed. And his obsession with this quest would fuel a lot of resentment from his underlings. Which really isn't surprising, it seems like almost every Slaaneshi warband is basically a bunch of Starscreams. But eventually, the quest would soon bring them back to his original basilica. Everyone that he had known prior was long dead. But of course that didn't stop Ulix and his buddies from nailing everybody else up on the wall like fish, and naturally he would go to find his original bishop and would defile his tomb. However, after doing so, his warband would be ambushed by a group of Eldari Rangers and Banshees. What also sets apart Ulix is he was a master swordsman. Despite his hulking size, he kept up with the finesse of the alien. However, his fellow battle brothers would not fare as well. One by one, they would either be cut down or shot down by the Eldari. Ulix would do his best to hold his own, though surely victory was in the hands of the Eldari. At least that's what the Banshees felt. They would unleash their sonic screams in a bid to snuff out the vile noise created by the Sons of Pleasure. However, this was their undoing. To literally anyone else in the galaxy, more than likely, this would leave them with popped-out ears and foaming mouths. But for the Angels of Ecstasy, this sound would act like f***ing Adderall. Their senses would heighten, they would shudder with pleasure, and they would act like it was a religious experience. Just before this, an Eldari Ranger had shoved his knife into the side of Ulix. But once he was revigorated by the shrieks of the Banshees, he would flick it out like a toothpick. Ulix would then go, "You," and would stab the Ranger right through the gut. Warning you now, this is where things get really, really weird. Ulix and his brothers would board the Praise Eternal, the capital ship of the Angels of Ecstasy. The hulls and corridors of the ship would echo with the howls of Slaanesh. That and muffled screaming. And if that's not terrifying enough, it was basically a giant mirror maze with hallucinogenic fog and lesser demons just roaming around. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Ulix would board with the Eldari that he had stabbed. He was still alive, and he was blindfolded. I told you this was getting weird. Ulix and his men would lead him to the heart of the ship. However, at this point, Ulix and the Eldari were the only ones permitted to enter. At this point, Ulix was vulnerable. He'd parse through the velvety drapes adorning the chamber, and all the agonies that had plagued him for centuries would fade away. His sister Defay would arise. She would take him by the hand and lead him to his bedchambers, once again singing her sweet song while holding the head of the teary-eyed Chaos Lord. Now, I would tell you what happened to the Eldari, but I don't think I can. The book is like $3 on Amazon. But with that out of the way, now that you know a little bit about the character, let's build the model. So, like I stated previously, I'm using the Legion Praetor with the Power Axe, and the first thing I would do is I would clip away at the little tube at the side, and I would cut down a cape from the Deathwatch kit. To attach the cape to the model, I'm applying a little bit of Tamiya just under the little nub for the power pack. I'm kinda welding it on with the Tamiya itself, and I'm gonna be using a little bit of sprue goo to kinda weld it together a little bit more. This won't be super noticeable as the backpack will primarily take up all the space, so it's not really something I'm worried about. For the backpack, I decided to snip down the wings from my basic Chaos Marine. I wasn't sure how I wanted to apply this at first, but I knew that I wanted to use the Praetor's original backpack and kind of just chaosify it up. The little Chaos skulls are just kind of perfect for this figure in my opinion. But for the actual Praetor backpack, I would snip the little ornamental piece on top. I think this is one of the things in the kit bash that I wasn't really happy with, as I didn't really do anything to replace this bit. But following that, I would also snip off the little orbulas on the side. This is pretty easy on Corvus pattern. Now when it comes to the Chaos Wings, I really wasn't sure how I wanted to attach these. As you can see, I was kind of going traditional with kind of having them just stick out. But something about it didn't seem right to me, and truth be told, it's because I didn't size them up correctly and I kept snipping down and I wasn't happy with how they looked, etc, etc. Realistically, I think this would look cool on another Marine, but this is where I decided to kind of change things up. I decided to glue the little wings downwards. I'd have the chin of the skull kind of resting against the cables. In my opinion, the subtlety makes it look even cooler. And I really like how the little spikes on top symmetrically line up together. I actually have a lot of extra Corvus Marines lying around, so I think it would be really cool to use this same method on them as well to make them into Renegade Marines. Once I was happy with the placement of the little side nodules, I would glue it onto the base figure. Now you're probably thinking it would be wise to glue this on later, and you would be right. Truth be told, the reason this video has taken so long to get out is I haven't been wanting to paint this figure because I basically built them all at once. If you're new, don't do that to yourself. But moving on, for his weapons, I decided to use this huge sword arm from the Chaos Terminator's kit. Which is fitting, he actually has a demon-infused sword. At first I was worried that the arm would be a little too chunky for this model, but it actually ends up fitting pretty nicely. Now, this is where things kind of stray off from the original character. He doesn't really have a helmet in the book, but I had this last resin upgrade bit, so I might as well use it, right? However, I would snip off the top knot. I have something else I want to place on here. But before doing so, I want to sand things down a little bit and leave just a little bit of grit for superglue. And to replace the top knot, I'm using this decorative plume from the other Legion Praetor that comes with the main box. This being the Legion Praetor with the power sword. Also, I ended up using this figure for another kit bash. Check that out afterwards if you're curious. I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to place this on the figure, but I ended up settling on a front-facing design. To me, this looks far more intimidating and lifeless, and I really like how symmetrically it lines up between the cowl. When I first got the Finecast upgrade kit, I really thought this helmet looked grody and I really didn't know what to do with it, but I think that grodiness actually works really well for this figure. Now for his pauldrons, I decided to use one from the newer Chaos Terminator's kit, and I would actually swap this out later on. I'm still using it, I just end up using it on the other arm. And speaking of his other arm, I ended up having to snip away at this conjoining tube, as it really did kind of interfere on the way that I wanted to pose this figure. Once I'd snipped away and sanded it down, I would use this Chaos Claw from the Cataphractii Terminator set. It looks weird now, but I have a very specific pose in mind. This is when I decided to use another Terminator pauldron, and this is from the original Chaos Terminator Lord kit. However, it didn't fit on the Cataphractii arm, so I ended up just swapping the two pauldrons with one another. But before doing that, as you can see, I'm placing my extra figure in line for the pose that I'm going for. I think you're kind of piecing things together. You saw a preview image, you already know what I'm doing. Right, like I said, replacing the pauldrons. I actually like how this looks better on top of it, so it just works out. Originally, I was just going to use two Chaos Terminator pauldrons from the newer kit, but the only ones that I had left had the little fur pattern at the bottom, and both of them were clearly designed for a right-facing arm. So I just felt like this one would work better. Now at this point, I decided to glue on those little decorative circular things that were on the base kit figure. I dabbed it with some glue in my X-Acto knife and whoa. Right, so I actually had to glue this onto the pauldron first and then attach the pauldron to the figure. Well, just for this one. The other one actually worked out pretty well, but it's funny. I'm not sure if I would keep these if I were to go back. I really like how they look, but I think it could be more interesting to have like a robe of sorts. It is what it is, I read the book late. But with that final element, I decided to call Ulix done. However, I'm not done kitbashing. To really drive the creepy Slaanesh vibes home, I decided to create a dark apostle for him to lean his giant power claw over. To start the figure out, I would snip away at this torso piece from the Blooded Kill Team kit, and I would fill out the back using some green stuff and glue it onto this pair of kneeling guardsman legs. This is from the old gun emplacement set. And for his left arm, I would actually use just a regular old guardsman arm from the same era. The head I ended up using from a Steel Helms kit, but I wasn't content with this face, it just didn't seem right. So I opted to swap it out using a bare head from the Blooded Kill Team kit as well. I found this stern-faced Baldy to be perfect. Her weapon, however, would come from the Steel Helms kit, just this classic claymore, and I decided to attach this pauldron from the Inquisitorial Kill Team. To me, this is what made the kitbash so fun. I think I pretty effectively created a lot of storytelling elements to the model with this addition. Having a figure whose life goal is to fight chaos fall to the god of pleasure, you can't tell me that's not interesting. But at the same time, remember, I didn't initially plan for this to be Ulix, but I think this works out. You could easily say this character is a more willing participant as a gift for Sister DeFay. Though I'd have to imagine Ulix would have to come up with some silver-tongued lies. Promises of power and pleasure, whatnot, you know, the usual. But moving more to the base, I decided to glue on this Iron Hands shield. I would probably remove this. For Angels of Ecstasy, this really doesn't make sense. For Emperor's Children, totally does. But as far as I'm aware, there's no actual connection between the warbands. And being that they're Slaaneshi warbands, it's not like they do favors for one another. For the base itself, I kind of went simplistic. I just added a bunch of PVA glue and I dunked them in my mixed bowl of sand and rocks. Admittedly, I wasn't feeling too creative with the base up until I decided to add in a little green stuff. Again, this is more befitting to just generic Slaanesh Marines. I decided to make some really gross, gnarly tentacles, and it's not like Ulix has this power, but it just feels fitting for the base itself. This is definitely not my best work when it comes to green stuff, but I'm not looking to make a masterpiece. Tentacles are probably one of the easiest things you can make with green stuff, and that's why I'm using them. And just to have one wrap around the Inquisitor's leg makes it so frickin' creepy. But with that last little element, I had to wait for the green stuff to dry, and then I would get to the painting. I'm gonna warn you now, I was very experimental with this paint scheme. There were some things that I would totally do differently, but maybe you'll learn something. So to start the model, I Zenithal primed him and I sprayed him entirely using Weird Elixir from Army Painter War Paints. This is basically an equivalent to Emperor's Children, although it's a little bit more pale. I then decided to spray over top the miniature using some Doomfire Drab from Army Painter Fanatics as well. I already find this color more befitting of Angels of Ecstasy. They're definitely a much more pale pink as opposed to the classic Emperor's Children pink, and I think that's kind of where I fell short with this color scheme. Looking at him now, he is much closer to Angels of Ecstasy than what he turns out in the end result. The reason for this is I kind of experimented with Noosh. Now, if you're not familiar with Noosh, basically it's a medium made by Proacryl to kind of emulate oil paints. I decided to mix it with dark magenta from Proacryl, and this color just ended up making this figure look like a bright neon pink. Now, for any other Slaaneshi warband, I think this actually looks really cool, but for Angels of Ecstasy, they're just not that color, they're more of a pale pink. I do think once I wiped away the excess, it did end up looking a little bit better, but I think I would go for a different color, maybe more of a darker red color. I think maybe a better color to pick from or use the Noosh with would probably be the dark magenta mixed with a redder color. Maybe mahogany. And at the end of the day, I'm really not too unhappy with the scheme. I think this is actually a really nice looking pink, especially when re-highlighting using the previous colors mixed together. It's just one of those things that I think I could have done a little bit better. Now, with the helmet, I decided to emulate the one reference image we have by painting it kind of a similar pale color. Now, I have no clue if their armor has the exact same color on the helmet, but with this, I just decided to paint it that pale color. And for this portion, I actually mixed the Noosh with mahogany and a tiny bit of dark magenta, and I think this actually turned out a lot better. Honestly, using this mixture on the entirety of the armor probably would have been the best look. I also want to mention for the black trim, I ended up actually painting it using dark silver and going over it with Black Legion. I had only really highlighted up by dry brushing over using a mixture of dark silver with just a little bit of bright silver. I think it would look really cool painting it on using kind of a Deathwatch black, but I really like the metallic look better. And for those nasty tentacles I added to the base, I decided to make them look really slick and nasty. I ended up painting them using glossy black from Vallejo, and I kind of highlighted them up using darker grays to white. Ugh. Not entirely necessary, but I want the squeamish factor of this model to be prevalent. And as one final little detail I wanted to add to the model, I decided with the pose of the little Inquisitor Acolyte that I wanted to add this kind of nasty blood oath little thing going on here. I'd kind of add a slash along the hand and just a little bit of blood on the sword. I don't know if it's canonically fitting or anything like that, but it's really cool. And with that, our figure is complete, and man am I happy with him. Well, for the most part. There's definitely things I would go back on paint-wise, and there's probably some things I'd want to fix up in the build process. But I can't say I'm unhappy with the figure. I do think he came out pretty damn good. At the very least, I hope I inspired you with some of these ideas, and maybe you'll make something even cooler than this. But I think I've flapped my beak enough for one video. If you did find this helpful, or at the very least enjoyable, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.